Sheriff, thank you for coming. It's all yours.
Thank you, Chair, Supervisors. I want to start out by just saying that the key word in this presentation is illegal immigration. I'm not referring to folks that are coming into our country legally and seeking asylum through the process that we have established. So through that, what happened is in November of 2023, I had the opportunity to attend a 3-day training on the border, and everything I talk about here today is specific to that particular border. I am just talking about the San Diego, San Ysidro, Tijuana region there. There's another region of California which is a primary immigration route, which is Imperial Valley. I did not go there. I'm not talking about Arizona. I'm not talking about New Mexico. I'm not talking about Texas. I am specific to that border. So there's a couple things that we're going to cover, and I truncated this down really brief, Supervisors, in the interest of time here. The border crisis and illegal immigration, the threat to America in Shasta County, and there is a real threat with the open borders that are going on. And finally, the sustainable resources that we have here in our county to offer citizens of this county. So with that, this is a link. All this information is on our website in a little bit more detail. I prepared a 3-page summary, basically, of that trip. So just for everybody's orientation on how this worked, we went down there. The first 2 days really were meeting with all the federal agencies, San Diego Sheriff's Office, all the task forces that are involved with the border. And then the third day I actually worked the border half a day along the wall and a half a day at San Ysidro point of entry. So just so you know, this is the border of the United States with Mexico is a total of 1,954 miles of border. If you're looking at just us right in this region here of California, that is approximately 140 miles of border. There's about roughly 50 miles of the wall that President Trump had started when he was in office that has been completed. And as we talk about that wall and how this related to my visit, I want you to understand the wall is not a solid wall that spans across the border. It has gaps and broken and incomplete in various regions, and that's how people are able to get through. So as the first day, there was so many different agencies that came in and are involved with the border and the open border and what's going on. It was overwhelming. I list a few of the significant ones here, and I can tell you the impacts are great, especially to the San Diego Sheriff's Office, who has to mitigate all the influx of crime and search and rescue operations and cartel involvement coming across the border on both sides. It's just phenomenal. And there's some key takeaways out of that I want to start off with. So if you look at this, and folks, this is not me making this up based on my political views about my position in law enforcement. This is facts that were given to me by the Border Patrol chief that I rode with during this whole event. These are facts where I actually witnessed this and saw what was going on. I talked to the people involved. It's not about what I've seen on CNN or the national media or anything else. This is me going there. The first one, the border policies and protection of the state literally changed, and this is their words, literally changed the day that Biden took office into an open border policy where they had hands off and could no longer control folks coming across our border. There is no mechanism in place, to send illegal immigrants back to their country of origin. That is another change that has been pretty profound. The cartels, primarily Sinaloa cartel, Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, known as CNG, and the Arellano Felix organization, AFO, engage daily in human trafficking, drug smuggling, prostitution, both in Tijuana and the greater San Diego region. And as we were driving along this border and this wall, which I'll show you in a minute, in a mock-up, The chief was pointing out the buildings in Tijuana right across the border of which cartels were involved with which buildings and what they were involved in. For example, he'd say, that's the Sinaloa cartel, and that building's for human trafficking. He'd say, that's the AFO cartel, and they're involved in drug smuggling. They know everything that's going on. It's really sickening and really profound to see the impacts that just that little place of the border is having on our state and our nation. Tijuana, since the open border policy, has now a staggering, just Tijuana, the city, 2,000 homicides a year. 2,000 homicides a year, mostly cartel related, and mostly related to drug smuggling and human trafficking. On that border, in 2022, 1.8 million pounds of narcotics were seized, 14,700 pounds of fentanyl. I could tell you those numbers have almost tripled and quadrupled since then. There's maritime resources and air operations going on a daily basis, all at the expense of the U.S. for people getting stranded out there or needing rescue services, and we're paying for all of that. Here's what's working good. This is a very positive part that's working on the border. The intelligence and the cooperation between all those agencies that I had listed up there, both local and federal, they are doing a great job in identifying known terrorists trying to make their way in through that border. Now, the caveat to that is it's known terrorists. They have to have a profile on these terrorists. They have to know who they are and have some sort of background on them. There's facial recognition. There's latent fingerprints. There's all kinds of sorts of screening that's going on, and they're doing good with that part. The U.S. Border Patrol told me that they feel that the wall can be very effective in helping mitigate a lot of what's going on if it's completed and if the policies are changed. And you can see the last stat there is that the U.S. agencies submit roughly 6,124,000 cases annually from border-related activity. So again, this is what we're talking about. The San Ysidro point of entry is right in here. The region that I worked was right in here and have information on. And I'm going to show you kind of a visual mock-up of what I learned about this. So if you look at that, that's our wall along the border. Now again, it's not complete. It's not without gaps. There's gaps within the ravines and the canyons and stuff, and people are able to get through it. But so far it's pretty impressive. Mexico also has a wall on their side on Tijuana right there, and their wall is even less secure and more gaps and incomplete, but it is a wall. That area in between the two in here is what I call no man's land, and that's just a term I gave it. That's the area that our Border Patrol works. It's about 100 yards in length across, and it's just desolate weeds and like a dry river that was going through their area, and there's nothing in there. It's the area people traverse when they're trying to come into our country through Tijuana and through Mexico. That's where that no man's land was patrolled. So here's a daily, multiple times a day occurrence that goes on. Countries know we have an open border. So they're flying one-way flights into Tijuana full of immigrants coming into our country. Once that plane lands, those people make their way across the border. They come through the Mexico wall and they get up to our wall. Now, folks, these are not, despite the narratives you may hear, these are not refugees that have been seeking asylum because they're fleeing their fascist government. These are people coming here because we have opened the border and they're coming without any repercussion. And if you don't think that there are terrorist organizations that are sending people in here and setting up cells that hate America and are going to do us harm, then you're ignorant. I'm telling you, it's happening. I'm watching it. So here's what happens next. The ones that make it to our wall, and I say that because when a plane lands and there's a couple hundred people getting off, the cartels start to pick off women and children so they can sex traffic, drug work in their drug labs, everything you can imagine. So the ones that actually make it to the wall are largely middle-aged males. We call them military-aged males that make it to the wall. But there are some women and children that make it, just not very many relatively in comparison to the group. So the group gets to the wall. They don't even try to come in past that wall because we are enabling them. From there, this is what happens. There's where they're trying to get. In Chula Vista, picture the size of Costco. There's 3 canvas tents set up in Chula Vista. This is called the processing center. This is where these people are headed to get processed to come into the United States. So the reason they don't leave is because we make it easy for them. They set up basically a transient camp along our wall. We have buses, Greyhound-style buses, at the processing center. We come in between the no man's land. We come over here, pick up these groups of people, and we bring them back to the processing center. It takes 52 hours, roughly, to process an immigrant coming into our country. In that processing center, we have food, we have medical, we have blankets, we have clothing, we have everything for them. And they're all screened and run through that process. The other thing I'd like to tell you about this groups of people that are coming in, and again, I witnessed this firsthand. I talk to these people. These people are dressed like you and I. They have iPhones, they have brand new backpacks, they have Nike shoes. They are not refugees. They are coming in to this country like that. So at the processing center, they go through this. Now here's the other thing. These illegal immigrants do not have to have any sort of ID. No proof of who they are, nothing. We process them for what they say. So if I say my name is Joe Blow and I don't have any ID, they fingerprint me, they photograph me, they say, where are you going? I say, well, I'm headed to Chicago. And they say, okay, it ought to take you 7 days to get to Chicago. Here's the name of the ICE agent in Chicago. When you get there, contact him. He'll set you up with a United States ID, a work permit, and subsidies to help you get established. And the final thing they give them is a citation for illegal immigration. And that citation and court date is 5 to 7 years out from when they have to appear in court for their illegal key immigration into our country. After they're processed, they're sent out wherever they're going. That's how many per day are coming just out of that Chula Vista processing center. 1,000 immigrants per day. Now, here's the thing about that. Don't think that this is intended or aimed at any one particular culture, race, or group. We have 60 different countries represented every day coming through that processing center, coming into our country. 60 different countries every day. 120 different dialects. And the reason I tell you that is because the Border Patrol and the resources that are working there have to mitigate that and have to get translators to deal with all these people. It cost the United States $3 million a month to run the processing center, and that does not include the salaries of all the people that are in there running that processing center. So of those immigrants in those 60 different countries, only about 2% to 4% maybe are Mexican national. They're all other countries being represented here. So once they go out, again, so if you put this in terms and try a little basic math about it, in roughly 3 months, the population of Redding has come into the United States illegally through this processing center. Now you times that by however many months we've been going with this program, and the numbers are staggering. And again, folks, this is only right there at Chula Vista, San Ysidro point of entry. This is not anywhere else. Highlights of that again, 1,000 immigrants per day. Only 2 to 4% are illegal immigrants are of Mexican national descent. 60 different countries. One-way flights into Tijuana to come across our border. 160 different dialects. $3 million a month to operate the Chula Vista Processing Center. Here's what I didn't tell you. I forgot to tell you in that. When I told you that if I'm an immigrant and I said my name is Joe Blow and they fingerprint me and I tell them where I'm going, I say Chicago. They'll say, my question to them was, well, who's paying for all that? How are they getting from here to Chicago and coming in? So the transportation within the United States, not so much, but getting there and getting to the processing center, most of these, probably 90% is the estimation I was given, of these immigrants coming in are sponsored by NGOs. And an NGO is a non-governmental organization. So my question was, so you're talking about a 501c3 or a church or something of that nature? And they said similar, and I'm not exactly clear on what that means, but my next question was who funds it? And who's funding the NGOs is our federal government. So our government is funding the NGOs who are sponsoring the illegals coming into our country. It makes absolutely no sense to me. It's super frustrating. I don't understand it. The last thing is open air detention centers. As you may see on national media, they talk about this inhumane treatment in open air centers. That's not a thing. What that is when they come across in those groups that I showed you to the wall, they're coming in groups of 30 to 200 people at a time. And they set up those transient camps and wait for us to come and get them and process them. We don't have a way, we get overwhelmed across that almost 2,000 miles of border, and sometimes they have to wait there until we can get enough buses and resources and get them in. So that is a farce as well. Now, I'd like to talk to you real briefly about San Ysidro point of entry. This is where actual legal immigration takes place, where it's on a daily basis or permanent. It is the busiest point of entry in the entire world. And it is crazy and staggering the amount of foot traffic and vehicle traffic that come through here. During that time, I only worked half a day at the San Ysidro point of entry. They said they pick off at least 2 load cars a day of drugs. A load car is a car or a truck or a vehicle that has hidden compartments that they've loaded up with illegal narcotics that come across the border. So when I was there, we picked off a little Toyota truck, and it had 16 pounds of fentanyl and 4 pounds of cocaine in it. And the warehouse and all the drugs that are there are just amazing. And they told me that's just a drop in the bucket of what actually comes through. Interestingly enough, the majority of the smuggling, at least coming by vehicle, is done by United States citizens that reside in Baja and Tijuana, Mexico. What the cartel does is approach them and say, we'll give you a handsome sum of cash, whatever that is, 10 grand, to take this vehicle and park it here, no questions asked. And people are doing it because it's large amounts of money, and it's worth it to them, the risk, I guess, especially if they're juveniles, because there's no real consequences for the juveniles. The other thing that's happening is some of these United States citizens or even Mexican nationals that come across the border to work every day, the cartel will run surveillance on them where they live in Mexico. They'll load up their cars with drugs, not even tell them. They'll watch the car come across the border and park, and they go off to their job, and then they'll go take their dope off of their car. And the reason we know this is because some of those cars are getting picked off, and people unsuspectingly come across the border. Supervisor Kellstrom, I'm using for examples. He lives in Baja, Mexico. He's a citizen. He's just coming across the border to work. The dog sniffs his cars. He's coming across. They pull him over. They pull off pounds of illicit drugs from his car. He doesn't know anything about it, and we can usually get through that pretty simply by interviews and interrogation and determine that he didn't know what was going on. My point in telling you all of that is most of those drugs coming across now are fentanyl. And fentanyl is an epidemic in this country and kills a lot of innocent people and young people who overdose by chance. And it's coming up our I-5 corridor on a regular basis. We have picked off loads as the Drug Task Force. We have picked off loads driven by illegal immigrants. It's here, and it's a problem, and that border is a big part of that problem. Just a few takeaways from that. SYPOE is San Ysidro Point of Entry, busiest port in the world. The precursors for fentanyl come from primarily China and some from the Middle East. into Mexico, into the Tijuana especially region. That's where they process and make fentanyl, and then they come across the border into the United States from there. What's happening now, because we've had so much illegal immigration, that they've set up these cells, have got people in our country. They set up primarily in our Midwest and the interior of our country, and they're starting to process and make fentanyl right here in the United States and bringing the precursors through there. Cartels like to use juveniles, little consequences for juveniles, and because the risk and reward pays off for them, and I told you about them already, kidnapping people and putting them into servitude. So here's what it boils down to, folks. We have this region down here of California where there's a lot of illegal immigration going on. There are illegal immigrants being shipped right here into Shasta County. Whether you want to believe it or not, it's happening. And sooner or later, the impacts on Shasta County we're going to realize. You all elected me to take care and protect the lives, property, and rights of people of Shasta County. And I am trying to do that, and this is going to be a hurdle for everybody. I'm telling you right now, because I work with the FBI, I work with federal agents, every one of them will tell you the threat to America is greater today than it was right before 9/11. And it is because of our open border policy. We have to address it. We have to look out for it. We have to look out for our resources. Now, I want to make something else clear. I told you at the front of this presentation, I'm talking about illegal immigration, not legal immigration. And here's my disclaimer for you to know that I'm serious. My wife is an immigrant. She came to this country, and her family came to this country through the legal process. They had to learn about the history of our country. They had to understand our country. They had to swear allegiance to our country, and they became a legal citizen of this country. I got no problem with any race, any nationality, any immigrant coming into our country and our state if they're coming through the legal process. When we're allowing these people to come in clearly truly documented and knowing what's going on, and we're giving away our country, it's going to have consequences sooner or later. So I don't like the fact that California, this is a personal thing, I don't like the fact that California passed Senate Bill 54 and doesn't allow me to investigate illegal immigrants just on being illegal immigrants, which I don't. But it's in place, and we're feeling some of the effects of it. So what I would ask is this board consider, if we get an illegal immigrant and they're here, and outside of the emergency situations, when they need help, they need resources, they need to be taken care of, fine. We need to be humanitarians and do our diligence there. But if they're just coming here to take and wanting handouts in our resources, I don't think that we should be delegating those resources for those purposes. So back to my wife and being a legal immigrant. Here's how it goes, and I've met several like her. Well, I married her, obviously, but I met several like her. And when we fly our flags, one from her birth country and the United States flag at my house, the United States flag always gets flown higher, always. She's the first one to make sure of it. Because she cares about this country, she came in this country, and she's grateful for this country. There's plenty of people out there, plenty of people that have migrated to the United States and to California that are just like that. I'm not so sure all of these ones are. So I'm trying to look out for the safety of our county and the safety of our state.